Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte and I will discuss the state's latest demographics, showing the state leading the nation in the rate of loss of people 18 years old and under. Governor J.B. Pritzker also announcing his bid for a third term in office. We'll hear about that. And we'll discuss stories impacting the economy and education. All of that and more when we return.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. Illinois leads the nation in the rate of people 18 and under leaving the state. That's just one of the headlines from the latest U.S. Census data released this week. To discuss this with Illinois in Focus, I'm joined by Jim Talamonte, the Center Square's reporter in Chicago. Jim, of course, these numbers that were put out on Thursday showing we're losing not just 18 and under at a more rapid pace than New York or California. We're also losing a good amount of working age people while seeing the number of people 65 and up increasing. You had asked the governor about this during his campaign launch today when we're recording this Thursday while you were up in Chicago. What was his response?
Well, he started to respond kind of the way he's responded in the past. That, well, you have to look at the big picture. We're actually adding people. And I said, well, no, Governor, 18 and under, we're losing more than any other state. And he kind of went off from there and said, well, you have to look at all the numbers. We're gaining people. So he didn't deny the numbers, but he wanted to look at the big picture instead of just younger people. And it's a different, it used to be, you'd think of, well, Illinois is losing older people. They're just people going to Florida to retire or going to Arizona. And it's not, this is just a normal run of, but this is different. To be now be gaining older people, maybe a little bit surprising. But the fact that we're losing, working class people, given that we've lost so many companies move and businesses move out of state and employment, especially in the private sector, on the decline. And we've seen a lot of college students or, high school students going to college leave the state, and many of them just don't return. And that's been an ongoing problem now for quite some time. And it seems like it's just getting worse with the latest census numbers that you brought forward, Greg.
Now, one thing that the governor has said, and he said this also earlier this month in front of a U.S. House hearing talking about the migrant sanctuary state policies, and he's said this when I've asked him questions about previous census data. He says the population is increasing. Jim, he's not wrong. We do have more people in the state than we did the year before. But when you look at in total over 4 years, we're still losing people. We lost 89,000 people since 2020. And really a major driver of last year's population increase came from international migration into the state, offsetting domestic migration of Illinoisans moving out to other states. When I talked with Ted Dabrowski earlier this week to get reaction to those census numbers, Dabrowski said, yeah, for this past year, that's going to be apparent in the census data. But now with Donald Trump as president, he's cut off the border. So we may not see those numbers in the future, which for Dabrowski signals with a loss of younger working age people, we're going to see some economic turmoil ahead, leaving fewer people to pay for rising costs for an older population. And obviously this is something that Republicans have been reacting to for years, saying that they are the ones that have the policy agenda to reverse these trends. But something else that we saw, Jim, was it's not a trend that Illinois is only facing. Other states are experiencing fewer younger people and older populations taking over in half of the counties across the country, according to the U.S. Census. course, this is stuff that you're going to see reported at thecentersquare.com. I encourage people to go and check those stories out and even watch some of the comments from the governor and from analysts looking at this data. Some of the other big points here, Jim, you've got and on the demographics, we did gain in the Hispanic and Asian populations, 217,000 people since 2020. We've also gained in Hispanic 124,000. With the Asian population, 93,000. But we lost 187,000 white Illinoisans since 2020 and 31,000 fewer blacks in the land of Lincoln. Jim, you heard the governor during his campaign address today. He said that, those minority groups out there need to take to the streets.
Yeah, exactly. He's and perhaps a not so subtle reference to some of the protests that have gone on lately around the state, but especially in Chicago. But when you're losing it, and we've been seeing this in Chicago, I think even longer than statewide, that white and black middle-class families are leaving. And we see now subdivisions across the state line in Indiana that didn't exist 15 to 20 years ago. Southern Wisconsin, booming. There are municipalities there that were tiny a decade ago and now have grown and are full-fledged, almost like suburbs between Chicago and Milwaukee. We see growth in Kentucky near the Illinois border and in Iowa and Missouri as well. So these kind of edge areas are attracting not just people, but also businesses. And perhaps the people are following the businesses. And so, yeah, we're not just losing snowbirds. In fact, it seems we're gaining them. But this is an issue when you have older people coming. Some may not be working. And then you have migrants coming, and it's a different migration that we've seen in the last few years than we saw previously. A lot of people would arrive here from Mexico or Central America and get right to work, whether they had papers or not. Different story with a lot of the people coming from Venezuela. It's just a different culture there. And given that they've had socialist regimes, some called them narco dictatorships in place now for the last 15 years or more, and there isn't quite that same mentality of getting right to work. And so some people have started heading back. Some have started to pick up work, but that it wasn't like we saw with earlier rounds of migration, even going back to the early 1900s, when people would arrive here, no matter where they were from or what their situation was in terms of documentation, they were getting right to work. And here, that's not always been the case. And as some of the people in the Trump administration pointed out, some of the people have come here and caused some issues, and now that's been a problem, especially in some of the nation's bigger cities.
And when you look at the census data as well, we also like to take a look at IRS data, which is expected out sometime in the months ahead. Annual data on the amount of tax filers in each state. And that tends to fit right into with these population trends, something that Ted Dabrowski from WirePoints highlights. We see more people who are higher income moving out of the state, and those who are moving in are lower income. So when you combine that with the loss of working age people over 4 years, you can really see the economic consequences of all of this. Jim, we're going to talk more about some economic consequences of state policy coming up here in a moment, but at the Center Square, people can read about Governor J.B. Pritzker announcing a bid for a third term in office as governor. You were at that campaign announcements event in Chicago Thursday. Tell us about it.
He actually had this announcement at the same place he announced his first run for governor when he ran and ended up winning in 2018 to defeat the incumbent Bruce Rauner. This was on the south side in a Park District field house in Grand Crossing. A lot of supporters there. And not shocking that he is running again, but he would not promise that he was going to serve out a full term, as he was asked several times, what about the presidential run? Will you serve the full term? And he essentially dodged that, but he wouldn't come out and say that he was committing to the full term. I think, the common sense would dictate that he would probably look at how things are shaping up in terms of a national campaign. It's not a secret that he certainly has interest in the White House. And if it looks like there's a legitimate shot, the question is, would he, if he did announce a run for the White House, would he continue as governor while running? I suspect he would. We saw that with Tim Walz in Minnesota. But obviously, if he were to run and win, that would change the dynamic in terms of how long he's able to be governor. So the other question, which he said he would have an answer for soon, but didn't have yet, was who his running mate would be. The current lieutenant governor, Juliana Stratton, is running for the Senate seat now held by Dick Durbin. She's not the only well-known Democrat in the field, but she certainly has the governor's backing and has gained a lot of support from him and will certainly, likely have some financial backing from him as well. So a lot to unpack there, but this, coming out now also would kind of allow other Democrats to figure out their next move. If there were people in mind who had the governor's mansion in mind, well, now they're going to have to wait and see because they're not going to want to run against J.B. Pritzker.
Especially as he self-funds his campaign as a billionaire. He's put in hundreds of millions of dollars into politics from his own pockets. So he has the campaign war chest already there for the Democrats. Obviously, there's a lot of reaction pouring in. I'm getting news releases flooding my email, Jim. We've got some of the reaction already at thecentersquare.com. We're going to see a lot more of that reaction coming through. I did talk with Kathy Salvi, the Republican, the Illinois GOP chair. She said, listen, it's 8 years almost now of failure under the Pritzker administration, saying that it's just been more taxes, more spending, and a variety of other things. When you heard the governor during his address today, what were some of the key issues that he talked about? Didn't he admit things are expensive?
Yeah, it was funny. He talked about things that have happened in the state, and he talked about what he said were his accomplishments in education and banning assault weapons, and it listed a number of different things. But then he went in kind of into the national political scene, and he said everything is so expensive. And then he said healthcare is broken, and it was a little bit unusual that I thought that he did that. Given when you think of the inflation, you really can't help but think of the inflation we saw during the Biden administration. When you think of healthcare, well, you think of what we had during the Obama administration, which was the promise that healthcare was going to be fixed by the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and yet here we are with those two issues. Major problems. He seemed to indicate nationally, but if you're looking at those as national issues, and then you look at Illinois, well, we're faring worse in those areas, whether it's healthcare costs or general inflation. We're faring worse in those areas than most of the other states, if not in some cases all the other states in the union. So I thought it was a little odd that he went in that direction. He undoubtedly, as usual, since January, has taken every opportunity he can to take verbal shots at the president, and that didn't stop. He even brought up Doge again, although his criticism of Doge had kind of died down the last 2 weeks. But he mentioned that. So kind of familiar campaign rhetoric. He talked on the one hand about his courage and kindness, and then turned right to take aim at the president. And so very interesting in that. But he certainly had a lot of his usual supporters there. It was energetic, but there's a long way to go between now and November of 2026.
You're listening to Illinois in Focus. It's a product of the Center Square. You can find stories about these and more at thecentersquare.com. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of Illinois for the Center Square, talking with Jim Talamonte, a reporter out of Chicago for the Center Square. And Jim, let's talk about the economy. Of course, the political decisions and the policy decisions that elected officials make impact how business operates and the economic prospects moving forward. One thing that Pritzker has done, I've kind of lost count of how many different tax increases have been implemented during his 2 terms now in office, but we're getting ready to see even more tax increases. You've got the gas tax that's going up. That's an annual increase since 2019 when they doubled the gas tax. We're going to see it go up a little over a penny per gallon. So people are going to be paying more at the pump. But Jim, that's separate from the budget. There's a bunch of tax increases in the budget that starts July 1st, literally right around the corner.
Yeah, and some of them are kind of hidden. And it's interesting, during his campaign rally, he mentioned that he cut the grocery tax. Of course, since that, now many municipalities across the, I think over 200 now have reinstated that, because that was not money that was money that was going to the local, municipal governments. And so that they losing that funding, now the municipalities many have either instated their own grocery tax or gone with just a sales tax measure to replace that revenue. But we're going to see taxes on, in addition to the gas tax increase, we'll see another thing that will affect some drivers or people who purchase vehicles, lower tax rebates on electric vehicle purchases. Not sure if this was meant as a political shot of sorts at Elon Musk, but the tax rebates will be lower on electric vehicles, including motorcycles. And then you'll pay higher taxes for short-term rentals, so your hotel type, situations.
Yeah, bed and breakfasts.
Right. Your Vrbo and Airbnb, those kind of things. Sports wagering, of course, that's been a booming business across the country. So you place your bet, you're going to pay a little more to place that bet. So you better win a little more often. Telecommunications, that's one that will add up quickly. Tobacco and vaping products will be taxed again. It's another one of those that where, well, we don't want you to do these things, but we need you to keep doing them so we get the revenue. And in a situation where, again, the census numbers really come into play with people leaving, that reduces, that revenue coming in. So the state becomes more desperate. And one area we see that is with corporate taxes, not directly affecting corporate income tax rates or property tax rates, but new tax rules that will cost businesses more money and essentially be taxes. So there is something called the global intangible low tax income. GILTI is the acronym.
Right.
And so this is on foreign earned income that comes in on a federal return. The state didn't tax that in the past. Now it will. So a company has some income coming in from another country, even if you're a small business and you're shipping things somewhere to another country, well, you're now going to be taxed on that income. Another change, and this gets even more kind of into the tax and financial weeds, is we're going to go from being a Joyce rule state. I confess, before this week, I didn't know we were a Joyce rule state, but we are a Joyce rule state. For now, we are going to become, January 1st, a Finnegan rule state. So now when you have businesses in a group or a grouping, corporate groupings, several companies under one corporate umbrella, perhaps, now, instead of one company that has ties in Illinois in that group being taxed, every company grouped with that company will now be taxed. So, let's say you have a group of companies that operates around the country. Only one of them does any business in Illinois. That one would get taxed in Illinois. But now, starting with this tax year now, every company in that group, even if that has no connection with Illinois, even a referral, if only one company in the group has some kind of tie, a nexus it's called, then all the companies in the group will get taxed. And because different states have different rules on these Joyce and Finnegan type situations, this, a pretty good explanation here by the Taxpayers Federation of Illinois and Maurice Schulten. He said, well, some companies will now get double taxed. Ideally, if you're getting taxed, 40% in one state, you might get, taxed 60% in another. It would add up to 100. But now, you may have some companies getting taxed 120 or more percent of their income. So that's difficult. And this is something that will, when companies start looking at where they're going to set up shop or where they might open a new location, well, this may deter companies from opening things up in Illinois.
And you grabbed an interesting perspective from State Representative Dan Ugasti, who in the early morning hours of the final day of session, he talked about this and he laid out there, listen, the way of the world is, these businesses, they're going to get hit with this tax, but they're just going to pass it on to consumers. So those who do stick around and deal with this a little bit more complicated tax structure for corporations, likely any kind of impact they see, they could pass that down to consumers. Sticking on the economy, Jim, you reported this week about the struggles that businesses face in the state of Illinois and how it impacts the economy, especially when it's a very litigious heavy state, meaning there's plenty of avenue for people to take businesses to court and try to hold them liable for financial penalties.
Yeah, this has been a problem for a long time, and we've been known to be a lawsuit-heavy state. Some of the, American Tort Reform and Citizens for, I forgot the Illinois chapter of Citizens, against litigious, against frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah.
Lawsuit abuse. Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse. There you go. These groups have referred to Illinois as a judicial hellhole and have ranked Illinois last or near last. Lawsuits can be filed in Illinois. And now with the new legislation of this past session that, again, passed, shoved in late in session, pushed through via shell bill, this will allow, even if normally if there's a workplace incident, something happens, there's going to be a lawsuit where it happens. Well, now, just a company which doesn't even have a location in Illinois, a workplace incident that doesn't happen in Illinois, could still face a lawsuit in Illinois over a workplace incident. And so these are the kind of things that will cost businesses, even if they're not directly sued, insurance, liability. I mean, it's the kind of thing, it's these kind of hidden costs where lawmakers will say, oh, we didn't raise taxes on businesses. No, but you did this. And this is the kind of thing that, again, will make Illinois more expensive and just more challenging, for first of all, small mom and pop companies, they don't have legal staffs to deal with these kind of things. And maybe they don't have the dollar amounts that they would be the targets of some of these lawsuits. But for your bigger companies now, they're going to have to devote more time in terms of their legal staff to look at these things, be prepared for these things. And then if they are sued, deal with these lawsuits. It just, and the lawsuit was supported by who? The trial lawyers of Illinois, who are the biggest recipients of campaign donations from the trial lawyers of Illinois. Illinois Senate President Don Harmon and Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch. And so, does it sound like pay to play? It must be legal, right? They're doing it. But that tells you where the power is and why these things are happening and why when some of these analysts, they're not just, they're not just critics crying foul about things or people being negative, as the governor said at his campaign rally. I like optimism. Well, this is just reality. This isn't an attempt to be negative. This is a reality. This is making things really difficult and expensive for businesses. And these kind of policies drive people away, as we're seeing with the census numbers, and keep businesses from even setting up shop here in the first place or expanding here.
And that bill that Republicans actually filed a lawsuit over alleged violations of the 3 readings rule in the Illinois Constitution for how a bill should be passed. That bill is on the governor's desk, and Republicans are saying that he should veto it. One last little issue here on the economy, Jim. The question of should Illinois do what Chicago's done and phase out the tipped wage? We've seen this now debated for several years now. A group called One Fair Wage pushing to get rid of the sub-minimum wage. Jim, I used to be a server. I served in several restaurants in the earlier years of my youth, and I loved going home with cash in my pocket every night. It was good money, and you had that bankroll, and you were able to, the better you were, the better tips you got. And sure, there were bad days, but it doesn't really seem like this push from One Fair Wage to have the entire state take on what Chicago's done to get rid of the sub-minimum wage for those who receive tips doesn't really seem like it's going anywhere.
No, it really doesn't. Not anytime soon. And it's very interesting that I must have received 5 different press releases, announcing this event, encouraging attendance at this event. Once I RSVP'd, reminding me about the event, there's been 5. And they included a number of names led by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, big supporter of this, to raise the tipped wage to the regular minimum. Another name right there probably mentioned State Senator Lakeisha Collins. Well, she wasn't there. And so I called her office and I talked then to the state senator, Collins, and she said Chicago's efforts are, encouraging, maybe encourage people to get into the industry. But she said, statewide, this is a different issue. And she said, we have to consider everyone. Everyone has to come to the table.
Jim Talamonte, reporter out of Chicago for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you taking time to be with us for Illinois in Focus, but also for your diligent work in Chicago. And it's something that you can read more of what Jim does, more of what I do, and our team at thecentersquare.com. Thank you for joining us, and listeners can keep up with more, again, at thecentersquare.com.